We live?
Yeah, I think so.
Here we go. Welcome to another episode of the Point by Point Tennis Podcast. We are your hosts, Carlos and Jishnu. And on today's show, we have a lot to talk about.
Yes, we do.
I will start with apologies that last week we couldn't record, and that's totally my fault.
That's
Nothing to do with Jish. I was actually moving, and that
Yeah,
was a bit of a
sure.
nightmare. Never rent with U-Haul. That's all I have to say about that. Or never move with U-Haul.
Well, there goes our U-Haul sponsorship.
I don't care. I don't want that sponsorship. But yeah, we're here. I finally moved everything out, and we're ready to record. So because we didn't record last week when Rome ended, we'll just talk a little bit about it today and cover some of the most important things. Jump into the French Open preview for both the men and the women. We'll go through the draws as we normally do, previewing who are the top seeds, what are the biggest stories, who are the favorites. And we also will want to talk about some big news that came out of both this French Open and prior regarding some off the court stuff. We had some coaching changes with Stefano Tsitsipas parting ways with his coach, not his father, the other coach, Mark Philippoussis. And we have some other coaching departures as well. And apart from that, we have a few war-related issues that come into the tennis world as well, both with the war in Ukraine and also a statement that Djokovic had put out in the camera lens after his first round win at the French Open. So these are things that we will cover, but on today's show, we were only going to focus on Rome, Roland Garros, and those other side topics. We will cover them on our next week show, where we're going to talk about results so far, halfway through the tournament, and then preview the rest. But before we go into all of that, there is also one big piece of news that came out before we were able to record, and that is the press conference that Rafa Nadal gave, talking about his plans for Roland Garros and beyond, right? So maybe we can start there, Jish. So there was a big news, right? That is that Rafa was not going to play the French Open. But not only that, he gave a press conference, and we didn't think that it was going to be just to announce, right, the fact that he's not playing at Roland Garros. So he did mention also a big thing for next year is that he's going to retire at the end of 2024.
Yeah. Is this a bit of a shock for you, Carlos, or did you see this coming? You're a big Rafa fan.
I'm a big Rafa fan. This was very painful for me.
I think you texted me with like crying emojis.
Yeah. I was very sad about it. I mean, it's expected. We saw everything that happened in the Laver Cup, right? We saw that as Roger was being sort of, say goodbye to, right?
Mm-hmm.
Rafa was very emotional about it. And,
right.
That sort of showed not only the fact that he really was worried or not worried. He was very sad about Roger and what it meant to him to retire. But I think he also a little bit felt the mortality in his own side, and he was very injured when he played the Laver Cup with Federer as well. He was going downhill already, and he's been pretty poor on the tennis court, right? Because his body has not let him be competitive. So seeing all that writing on the wall, I think pretty much I knew that this was going to happen at some point. Honestly, to be completely frank, I thought it was very possible that he was going to announce his retirement, plain and simple.
Right then.
I didn't think it was the most possible scenario, but I thought it was a possibility, right?
Okay.
Because he's just not been able to be healthy this year, and he tried very hard to get fit for Roland Garros. He's obviously the defending champion, and he won't be able to defend his title. So and he's had a big, we all know the history of Nadal at Roland Garros. So he really wanted to play there, right?
Mm-hmm.
But he's not going to play there if he's not fit.
Right.
And he had to withdraw from the tournament. So it was interesting seeing the press conference. Do you have any initial thoughts from the news?
Yeah, I mean, I was shocked. I didn't think he was gonna talk about his retirement. I thought it was just gonna be a setback, and then we'll see where it goes. But it seems like he has a greater plan. He wants to end things on a different note than probably that Federer did.
Yeah.
You know? However, I wouldn't be surprised if he reconsiders his retirement plans if he starts playing really well.
Yeah.
You know, which I hope that happens. But
Yeah.
you never know.
Yeah, he did mention that. He said that he was asked the question of, if you come back and it's better than you expect, is it possible that you continue? And he's definitely said that it's a possibility. He just said that how he has battled with his body. We got to remember he's not been healthy since the pandemic, essentially.
Yeah.
He's been fighting with some sort of injury, on and off since that time. And he gave a lot of insight about how difficult it was for him outside the court, like in his everyday life, just to manage with the pain and the rehab that he had to do for everything, right? He had the abdominal thing. He had, the foot, the zombie foot.
That's ridiculous.
Yeah. Killing
He
his
still
foot
won.
to just win Roland Garros. That's
Still
crazy
won.
stuff. And then now the most recent thing with the hip injury, right? It's just been one thing after the other for him, and he's just been struggling a lot with it.
Did he say anything about the hip condition, or?
Yeah, I mean, he said that it's just not improved as much as he would
Is
like.
there like a nerve that he can burn or something?
I know, right? I wish he just needs the treatment that Murray had, the metal bionic hip.
That would take like 6 months to like a year.
Yeah.
At least like a year to recover from, probably.
Yeah, probably. So we'll see. I mean, he's gonna try to give his body a break. That was another thing that he announced, that he's gonna take complete time off from the tennis court, no practice, no nothing, for 2 to 3 months, and he's gonna try to enjoy like a vacation, essentially. And hopefully that he's hoping that his body itself will start to heal a little bit, and get more ready for the actual treatments and the actual regimen that he needs to put in to get ready to be competitive next year. He did mention that he's planning to come back for Davis Cup this year, so we might see him on the court this year, but not in any like tour level events. He's definitely out of Wimbledon.
He's out of Wimbledon. He's
Yeah.
possibly out of.
He's most likely
US
out
Open.
of the U.S. Open swing completely. But I think he's going to try to come back for Davis Cup.
I see.
And it's interesting, as a side note, but Alcaraz was actually asked in his press conference in the French Open about the possibility of playing the Olympics next year with Rafa.
With Rafa.
And he did not shy away from it. He said it like, that would be a dream. It would be a dream for me to play with Rafa. So
wow.
let's see if Rafa can get healthy enough and get his ranking high enough, because I think there's a cutoff for ranking for the Olympics. So
you have to qualify.
I think he'll have to be like in the top 4 or 5 players from his country to be able to play.
I see.
So maybe they can do some sort of wild card or something to make sure that he plays. Because come on, he's Rafa.
He's Rafa.
And it's going to be at Roland Garros. So
Oh my gosh.
yeah. So that could be an amazing
Wait,
goodbye.
So it's next year.
Next year. Yeah.
I forgot because we actually
Yeah.
this year or delayed 1 year.
Exactly.
For the Tokyo.
Yeah.
So
So that's
there'll be
possible.
There'll be the Olympics at Roland Garros and obviously the French Open too.
Yeah.
So
You imagine
this
if he
is
wins
his
them back to
time.
back?
Oh my gosh. Do you know when
That'll
it is?
It's after. It must be after Wimbledon, because I remember
That's
when Murray won it. Remember that he
it was
played.
after. Yeah.
It was after he played Roger. He
there,
lost
and then he won.
in Wimbledon, and then he won in Wimbledon in the Olympics.
It was at Wimbledon.
At Wimbledon. That's why I remember, because it was
Yeah.
back to back at the same court. And it was after, so
This
it
will be
definitely has to be
interesting.
after Wimbledon. But unless they like bring it up, because well, the Olympics are not going to change just for tennis. Yeah, I think it's going to be some point in the summer. Somewhere in the summer.
Okay.
But yeah, I think those were the kind of the bigger stories from his press conference. I don't want to linger too much here because we are a lot to talk about. But there's a few things that I liked from seeing this press conference. So it was a 23-minute press conference, mostly in Spanish and in Mallorquin, which is like kind of like the Spanish dialect from Mallorca. So if you have the time and you could translate, I would definitely encourage listeners to take a look at it. Some of the things that really stood out to me, apart from his messages that we've already discussed, is he got a question about like being a role model for, for others, and the way he's approached the tennis and the injuries and all that. And in a similar vein, he was asked about like what mental health means to him, and how he sees mental health. And it was interesting, his response, because he talked about how when there's a fine line between blaming too much things on mental health, but also not addressing it when you actually need to. And it's very hard to like find that middle ground. And one thing that he like said is that sometimes mental health is something that you also train, so that you have to make sure that you have to be able to overcome difficult situations, and not let difficult situations sort of scapegoat the fact that, oh, it was a mental health situation, so therefore I can't overcome it. He was like, you train your brain a bit to be able to overcome it, but if you need both things, you need to be able to treat it when the situation comes, but also you need to be ready to suffer and to be able to overcome. And that's how he has approached both his career, and how he approaches difficult situations mentally, like this moment where he's trying to come back and he keeps getting injured and he can't recover. So I thought that was a really good insight into how he sees the whole approach of coming back and struggling mentally with it. So that was a really good insight for me. Any final thoughts from Rafa's press conference before we move on?
Yeah, we're gonna miss him.
Yeah, absolutely.
How many years has it been?
It has been 18 consecutive years of Rafa Nadal at the French Open, and 15 of those he has, or 14 of those he has lifted the trophy. So it's sad to not see him there, but tennis moves on. He said it himself when they were saying things about Djokovic not being in Australia, and it was Nadal who said no one player is bigger than the sport. And I think he would agree that applies to him too. And I think we're gonna miss Rafa, and I certainly miss him a lot, but I think we're gonna still have a great French Open. And I'm excited to talk about it today. So with that, let's move on to Rome. We won't spend too much time covering here. Let's try to cover the highlights, right? The biggest things. I think let's start with the men, and the biggest surprise.
Yeah.
Seeing Daniil Medvedev lifting the trophy in Rome.
Wow.
What is that, Jish? What is your thought from seeing that happen?
Well, I don't know if Danielle ever imagined it either until maybe getting into the final.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it was a crazy run that he went.
Yeah, he actually played well. I mean, I was surprised. Yeah, I mean, I thought Rune would end up winning that, but didn't happen. So, yeah, I mean, I was a little speechless.
Yeah.
Like
I think
I didn't expect
for
that.
me, it's absolutely incredible to see Medvedev win this trophy. I think it goes a lot to show. We are a little bit in the limbo area right now, where some of the best players, like we had the big three, right? They were the reliable players. Now Roger's retired. Rafa seems like he's on his way out as well. But there's still Djokovic, and he played this tournament. he struggled. He lost to eventual finalist in Holger Rune. Um, and that is a little bit of the story of the current times, right? Now we only have one of the big three. There isn't like, a hunting pack of, if you beat one, you got to beat the other, and then you got to beat another one again. That's not a thing anymore. If you can get through Djokovic, there's an opportunity, right? And the fact of the matter is, there still isn't anybody completely reliable because some of the better players right now are young. So they are gonna have hiccups along the way because they're still learning. They're still very, very, very young. I mean, Sinner is 21 years old. Alcaraz just turned 20. Holger Rune, I don't think has turned 20 yet. And we have players like Musetti, who is also like in his 20s or like early 20s. We got Felix, who's like 21 as well, or 22. So these are players that are, I think, are reliable talents, particularly in the case of Sinner, Alcaraz, and Rune. I think these guys, they are going to win a lot. Like, I have no doubt in my mind about it. But they still have some just young player issues, right? For example, Rune, he just can't stay fit for an entire tournament because he's still growing into his body. He hasn't really learned how to develop physically in the appropriate way. Alcaraz has learned to do that, but he still gets a little bit injured here and there. He plays a very physical game still. It's not very efficient yet. So you see these things. And then you get a player like Daniil Medvedev, who's Mr. Consistent, Mr. Reliable. Like, a player like that, he takes advantage of all this. And then we have the other generation. Speaking of Medvedev, we have guys like Tsitsipas, right? And Tsitsipas, unfortunately, he's just been very inconsistent, right? He hasn't been as, he's staying static in terms of his progression. He's not going up. He's staying static. He loses very constantly now to the younger players. And even in positions where he should be winning, say in Rome in the semifinals against Daniil Medvedev, right? A guy like that, he's not able to do it. So, yeah, I'm not sure what's going on with him, with Tsitsipas and all that. But for me, this Medvedev title was more a little bit a symptom of the times than anything specific that Medvedev did well. And that's not to diss Medvedev, because if you ask me right now, we're going to talk about the power rankings, right? There's no doubt in my mind that Medvedev can finish number one in the world this year. But the fact that he's winning Rome, clay, a tournament that, to be frank, when you watch him play, he should not be really doing that great. His movement on the clay is still not great. He still does not know how to slide into his shots. He slides out of his shots a lot. Sometimes he doesn't even slide at all. And he's always on sort of the back foot, on clay. And he still managed to win this tournament. To me, it's a little bit more of a show of the times. I don't know. But, I mean, I got to give him credit. Medvedev he showed up. He did what he had to do. He beat who was in front of him. And he beat some good players. I mean, it's not like he didn't beat good players. I mean, beating Tsitsipas, beating Rune in the final, who beat him in Monte Carlo a few weeks before. That's well done,
Yeah.
So good stuff from
Medvedev.
In this tournament. Anything else you want to talk about in terms of? Maybe I'll just mention one more thing. Just the final, the match itself. Rune looked like the better player. Honestly, he looked like the better player. It's just that he couldn't put together a winning strategy, and that's the thing that Medvedev is really good at right now. I mean, he's a Grand Slam champion already. He knows how to be a number one player essentially, and Rune is still figuring out how to put together a winning strategy. But the way that he beat Djokovic just showed the talent that he has, right? Djokovic was not at the fullest power, but he was doing some amazing things in that match. So I think Rune does have a lot of potential, and it's just a matter of also growing into his body, staying fit for an entire tournament. That's what's going to make his success bigger or lower, as we move forward this year, I think. Any other thoughts from you?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think you said it nicely. I mean, Rune had his chances.
Yeah.
I think in that final. Like you said, he's a young player. He's gonna have some room for improvement, like strategically.
Yeah.
Right? So, but I think his body. I mean, he looks fit enough to win these longer matches. So it'll be interesting to see how he's gonna do in the French.
Yeah.
This year, especially.
Yeah. But this is the second final that I've seen from him in the clay season. I mean,
better.
if you ask me who's been the best player on the clay this year, it would be probably a toss-up. If Rune would have won one of the Masters that he'd lost in the final, it would be Rune. And right now, as it stands, it has to be Alcaraz, right? Because he won a Masters.
Yeah.
And he also won Barcelona. So
it's not Rublev. Just joking.
I mean, you could make an argument. You could. Not one that I'll buy, but you can make an argument.
No.
But honestly, it's one of those two players, right? And the fact of the matter is, Rune has run out of gas in all of these tournaments, right? He won the title in the 250 event, but then he wasn't able to finish the job in Monte Carlo or in Rome. And a lot of it had to do with his physicality. And that's a problem. So is that going to get better in a 5-set match? Roland Garros? I'm not sure. Like it's tough because the talent is there, but I'm not sure of him physically. And that's the thing that Medvedev does have well.
Yeah.
He does have the physicality.
I think you are right about this.
Yeah.
I think he's getting better from before.
Oh, yeah. Definitely much better than before.
Right. You're right. Maybe he's not up to par.
Yeah. And I just want to clarify. This is not a criticism. He's 19.
It's ridiculous.
This is just a fact.
He's
just young.
Alcaraz.
Yeah. He's a little bit younger. He's going to be 20 this year, too. Yeah. He just turned 20. And Alcaraz, he got there physically a little bit faster than Rune and than Sinner. But he's also still young. He's also prone to maybe break down in a longer match. Though the thing that he did in the U.S. Open was crazy last year. So at least he showed that it's difficult to predict with Alcaraz because he can break down, but he can also survive like huge 5-setters and do it, right? So I think he's a little bit more physically reliable, even though that he's still vulnerable to that. But Rune, I still have my doubts. Similar to Sinner, I have my doubts with the physicality part. Even though it's better, he's also, like Rune, improved a lot physically this year. But they're still developing their bodies. They're still young. And their games are a little bit on a faster pace than their bodies right now, I think. But incredible tournament for Medvedev. And, you got to give him props. Medvedev has won now, like, what is this? His 5th title, I think. He won the 3 titles in a row. Then he won in Miami. And now he won in Rome. So 5 titles. And one of them on clay. And a Masters 1000. You got to give him props for that. That's huge. Anything else from the final? And there's a few other things I want to discuss from the rest of the draw. Just minor things.
Yeah, I think that's it.
Okay, so moving on. I think great week for Casper Ruud.
Yes.
A little bit overshadowed by the fact that he really choked away the match against Rune. He should have won that.
Yeah, which is surprising, right? That tells
very
you
surprising.
How his level is right now, which is astronomically better in a sense, like, a few weeks ago.
Oh, yeah. And this is similar to last year. Like, people forget that last year he was pretty poor in the clay until he got to Rome. And on Rome, he got to the semifinal.
Except for the 250s, right?
Except for the 250s. He cleaned up those.
He cleaned up.
Then he didn't have anything left for the other Masters events. But then he recovered for Rome. And he played well. I mean, he should have beat Rune. He had him down a set and a break. And then he just played a really poor service game. And Rune found some energy to come back from that match and take over. But very, very encouraging signs from Rude. I think he's finding his game now.
Mm-hmm.
He's not completely back, but given the draw that he's in French Open,
Oh
he
my
might be
gosh.
he might be
He
might be
doesn't even have
dangerous
to- I mean,
to
it's
make a deep run.
it's
again.
interesting that like he was able to do this last year, like in a way, like he was able to peak at Roland Garros.
Yeah,
I mean, he got to the final.
exactly.
You don't think of him going to a final in the French, and he has a very strong opportunity here to do
Mhm.
it again, and he looks like he's planned his peak performance at Roland Garros,
Yeah.
which is, as an athlete, I think that's exactly what you want to do,
Mhm.
right? So
He's doing it the
it's
right
gonna be
way.
interesting. Yeah.
You know who didn't peak for Roland Garros? Daniil
Daniil
Medvedev.
Medvedev.
Spoiler alert. I'll save it for later.
He peaked too soon.
He peaked too soon. Okay, so we talked Casper Ruud. Honestly, also he faced Cerundolo in the quarterfinals. Great run for Cerundolo.
Right.
That was great stuff for.
He's also playing really well, right?
Yeah, he's playing well. He beat Sinner in this tournament, so that's really good win for Cerundolo. And he's dangerous like that on the clay. He can beat anybody when he's on. He has a cannon of a forehand. And on clay, if you have that kind of power, you can do damage. So great run for him there. But really, the other big story to talk about here before we leave for the women's draw is Djokovic's performance. And I gotta say, well, I guess there's two things. Maybe I should mention both of them in the same breath. So the two favorites for this title probably were gonna be Djokovic and Alcaraz. And Djokovic lost to Holger Rune in the quarterfinal, while Carlos Alcaraz, he lost to Fabian Marozsan
Yes.
in the second round.
In
So
the
or in the
second
third round, his
round.
second match. Honestly, which loss are you more worried about, if at all worried about either of them?
Maybe Alcaraz, but it's just weird that he has these off days. I think he gets passive when he starts playing. Like I saw some of those highlights, and it just doesn't seem like he's out on the court than how he normally is.
Yeah.
So he has to either somehow clean up his, these little rough patches he gets. Maybe it's a mental thing.
Yeah.
I mean, I think physically he could probably. We saw him at the U.S. Open. I think he's more than capable of just getting his body to do these things. But I don't know. Yeah, I mean, unless it was an injury, which we don't know of. But
It was not an injury for sure.
He did look like he was a bit. He's just playing too passive.
So I saw this match in its entirety. I honestly thought he played well. And this other guy,
It's too good.
he was Alcaraz for that day.
Yeah, it looked opposite.
It looked opposite.
Yeah.
That's why. So I get what you say about him looking passive. A lot of it was because this guy was taking the time away from Alcaraz a lot. And he had to react to that. So he was on the back foot the whole time. He was hitting drop shots like he was Alcaraz. Like he had so many drop shot winners in this match.
Oh, that was ridiculous.
Marozsan. And he was serving lights out as well. He just had one of those days. It happens. It happens. He kept it going against Coric for a set. He looked just as impressive in that first set against Coric. And then he came back to his ranking. He started spraying errors everywhere. But he was redlining. He was honestly playing a little bit like Struff in that final against Alcaraz and Madrid. Similar style of attack. But he just looked like he couldn't miss, and beautiful technique, and he looked like a real player. Like honestly, I was seeing this guy, and I was like, why is he 100 and whatever in the world? But that's the thing, right? A lot of players, even in the hundreds, especially really nowadays, are very good. It's just consistency, the difference, right? So if you were to ask me the question that I just asked you about which loss between Djokovic and Alcaraz I was more worried about, I honestly felt more worried about Djokovic than Alcaraz. The reason is because when I saw the match, Djokovic played well. Like his miles per hour were much more there compared to like the other tournaments that he played, but
He didn't look.
he just doesn't look confident, and his elbow still feels like there's something wrong with it. Now, granted, he got asked about it in the French Open. He said he's fine physically. He's peaking for the Grand Slam, and I believe him. He's a 22 Grand Slam champion.
You know something.
I mean, I'm not gonna start doubting him. You know, so, but the problem is that last year he peaked at Rome, and he was ready to go for Roland Garros. He didn't win Roland Garros because he ran into Nadal right in the quarterfinal. He would have won it, I think, if he would have beaten Nadal.
Yeah.
So, honestly, this is a different year. Like, he didn't look good against Rune, and the thing is, the way he lost against Rune seems repeatable. Like, I can see him losing to a Rune, to a Alcaraz, to a Sinner in the same way that he lost here. Whereas this Marajan thing is just one of those things that
Fluke.
he is a fluke. You know, I saw the first round match from Alcaraz in the French Open. He's totally fine. Believe me, he's totally fine.
Yeah, he's fine. Yeah.
He's fine. So I'm not worried at all about him. So I'm honestly more concerned about Djokovic, but I still give him the respect because he is a 22-time Grand Slam champion and everybody else is not. So that is the one thing. But I thought that was an interesting storyline coming out of Rome from the men. But maybe anything else you want to say before we move on to the women's draw?
No, I think that's about it.
Okay. So
Keep
let's maybe switch to the women's, where we had a somewhat of a surprise finalist, or winner, I guess, in Elena Rybakina. Not a surprise in the fact that she's been really good just in general this year, but clay has not been her main success, right? But again, I think this provides this continues two narratives, right? One, that there is a big three in the women's game. I think is solidifying itself a lot at the moment, and that big three obviously is Sabalenka, Iga, and Rybakina. No question about that. It also solidifies the fact that Iga has a Elena Rybakina problem. And without talking about the final, which was unfortunately, nothing to talk about really. If you recall from the final, the Elena Rybakina actually ended up winning in a walkover, essentially, or not a walkover, in a retirement, because who was it that she played in the final? Was it Kalinina? She was injured, so she couldn't continue after a little bit in the second set.
That was an amazing run by Kalinina.
It was an amazing run from Kalinina.
It was sad.
Yeah,
she couldn't play.
It was very sad.
Up. Yeah,
and a lot of it also, comes down to scheduling. Like, she had to play a very, very late match, and we've beat this topic to death. So I'm not gonna even talk about it. But this women's scheduling was also a problem in this tournament, just as it was in Madrid, and they were vocal about it again. So no cake gate this time, but still the same problem.
That's unfortunate.
So that's too bad for Kalinina, but it doesn't take anything away from Rybakina, to be honest. I mean, Rybakina did win by 3 different withdrawals or retirements or something of the type, including her match in the quarterfinal against Iga. But I do gotta say, so I was talking actually to my dad about this match, and we were when I say this match, I'm talking about the Iga against Rybakina match. And from what I got from the conversation with him, he is fully on the bandwagon of Iga cannot deal with Rybakina. Now, when I discussed this with him, I was kind of like, this is Iga on clay, and if she's healthy, I'm still going with her. But thinking about it a little bit more, I kind of think that this seems very similar to the 2011 season where Djokovic just keep beating Nadal every single time they played, and he started to get into his head. And I think he beat him. Ended up beating him like 7 times in a row in all surfaces. Essentially, doesn't matter what surface they played on. It was just he was in his head essentially. This is looking like that now. Like this is the third time this year that she's beat her.
Granted, during that time, Djokovic was really pretty good.
Well, he became pretty good by beating Nadal all those times. Like that was the year that he won 40 or something matches, right? But the first time he beat Nadal, he didn't have that many matches won, right? He had a run.
Yeah, I mean, I guess Rybakina.
And then it kept like snowballing, right? He beat him twice in the Sunshine Double, and then they got onto the clay, and he beat him again, and then it started snowballing. And if not for Federer beating him and beating that streak, right? Which that was
French.
the finger wag match.
Oh my gosh, that
was a great match. If Federer doesn't do that, who knows if Djokovic wins that Roland Garros against Nadal in the final, right? Because he was in his head completely, and that happens sometimes.
Luckily, Federer came to
Federer came to the rescue.
They were like best buds.
Exactly. So he threw a little layup there for Rafa, but. I think this is looking very similar, and if Iga has to beat her, if they face each other in Roland Garros, I think she has to beat her this year to not get completely psyched out. Because it can happen, Yeah. I mean, Rafa took a long time to recover from that thing with Djokovic. It took him a long time.
Yeah.
So it might be. I still favor Iga and Roland Garros, and until somebody can prove that they can beat her at Roland Garros, I'm not going against her. But let's not forget, Iga was a 2-time defending champion of Rome, and Rybakina was on her way. I mean, granted, she was injured, but the injury occurred in the tiebreaker after Rybakina was already in the lead in the tiebreak to win it. So it was even before the injury. Anything could have happened. So it was a closer match. Like obviously, Iga won very comfortably the first set. So if she had any issues coming into the match, she was able to put them away there for momentarily, but then she lost that second set, and who knows what could have happened. So I think that was kind of the biggest storyline that came out of this tournament for me, like that matchup between them two, and seeing how that could lead into a potential matchup in Roland Garros between them, right? Because they can meet, I think, in the semifinals. So that was the biggest storyline. I think talking about the final is not even worth it because of the retirement.
Yeah, the retirement.
But in general, Rybakina was just able to impose her game with her serve, and she moves pretty. I mean, she plays well on the clay. She has a good career record on the clay. It's not like she can't play on clay. It's not like Medvedev. It's not completely out of the blue. But it's still a surprise, right? I think the biggest surprise of this tournament probably was that Sabalenka lost in the first round. Or I guess in the second round because she had a bye. And she lost to, was it Kenin that she lost to?
Yeah.
That was a shock. But after the match, she said that she was just exhausted and she just needed a break. And Kenin played well. And she was able to take advantage of her being completely exhausted. So, honestly, I don't read anything into this. Sabalenka has done enough this year for me to trust her in the bigger tournaments because this is the first time she hasn't gone far in a tournament this year. So,
I think this is the first time hearing you say that.
Right? I mean, compared to last year, that would not be the case, right? No. But she's changed. She's changed. Yeah. She's changed. She's turned it around.
We talked about that earlier, but yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely.
So I think that was the other big shock, but all in all, I'm not worried. Not worried about her. How about you? You worried about Sabalenka for French Open or?
Well, we'll take a look at my prediction.
Oh, we'll see.
We'll see.
Okay, we'll save it for later.
But no, yeah, I'm not too worried about her level. I think she's gonna maintain that high level. Yeah. Cool.
So, final thoughts before we move on. I have one person that I want to give a shout out to. So Veronika Kudermetova. Honestly, if we already not one round past French Open, I would say that she would be someone to keep an eye on. But spoiler alert, she's already out. But before the French Open, she actually played really well in both Madrid and in Rome. And I think it's worth mentioning that she really was able to turn it around because she was struggling a little bit earlier in the year. And she had a pretty good win against Kim Win-Chuen, who I'm really, really high on. I think she's going to be really good. She's 19 years old. And she was the only player to take a set of Iga last year in Roland Garros. So I'm pretty high on her. So that's a really good win for Kudermetova. And we'll see if this is just something that she's going to continue to build on. But that's all I had for the women's side in Rome. I think with that, I'm ready to move on to the French Open.
Let's do it.
You ready? Let's do it.
Second Grand Slam of the year. Let's do it.
Okay, let's start with the men's.
All right.
Just pulling up the draw here.
Number 1 seed, Carlos Alcaraz.
Yeah, let's talk about who are
The seeds.
the top seeds. So, on the men's side, we have top seeds are number 1. Oh, I guess this is a big storyline that came out of Rome. Daniil Medvedev, by winning Rome, became the number 2 player in the world. And by becoming the number 2 player in the world, made it possible for Djokovic and Alcaraz to meet before the final. And that indeed happened in this draw. So, Medvedev.
Good job, Medvedev.
Thank you, Medvedev, for disrupting this tournament and then piecing out in the first round. But we have number 1 seed, Carlos Alcaraz. Number 2 seed, Daniil Medvedev. We have Novak Djokovic as number 3 and Casper Ruud as number 4. Stefanos Tsitsipas is number 5, Rune 6, Rublev 7, and Yannick Sinner is the 8th seed. I'm not going to mention the rest of the seeds, but we have 32 other seeds, right? But those are the top 8. I think probably in most people's minds, the winner should come from one of those names. And with that, we can go into the different sections. So maybe we can summarize a little bit what's happened so far. We've had one round, and we've had a number of upsets already, right? So for the men's side, we have, in terms of seeds losing, we have 8. We have 8 upsets on the men's side. But I think there isn't a bigger one than Daniil Medvedev, right?
Yeah.
He lost today to, I'm going to butcher his name, but it's Thiago Seboch Veld, something like that. It's not wild. You're supposed to read it like with the V, like with the German type of, or the Swiss, like Wawrinka kind of.
Wawrinka.
So like Vald or Vald, something like that. And we saw some of those highlights, and he was blasting the ball.
I guess there's some people that are just playing really well.
Yeah.
Some of these matches.
Yeah. And this guy, like he's shown some potentials before. So this guy, the backstory with him going into this tournament is, so he's a qualifier, right? He had to qualify his way into this tournament, but this is his first tour level match of the year. He's been around before, and he's shown promise as a junior and as a young player on tour in the past. But he had like a lot of like personal issues apparently, and injuries and whatever it is that kept him off the court. But he typically is really good on clay. He's won 2 challenger titles on the clay this year.
Oh, that's great.
And he has like a 30 and I want to say he has like an 80% win percentage this year on the challenger level. To be fair, not on the tour level. But he's coming in with some form, right? And he's good on clay. So particularly, I mean, we saw he has a big weapon on his forehand, so that's why he does well on the clay. But honestly, nobody was expecting Medvedev to lose this early.
Yeah.
Now, to be honest, Medvedev results in Rome sort of overrated him a bit. Like we saw the betting odds earlier, and Medvedev was the 3rd favorite to win Roland Garros. I mean, in what world? Like people just recency bias at the most extreme level. I mean, come on. He won Rome, that's fine, but he's typically not that great at this tournament on the clay. So a little bit overblown, but definitely was not expecting him to lose this early. And particularly for this draw that he had, he could have made the quarterfinal. I mean, there wasn't that many threats.
Yeah, he had a great draw.
So honestly,
Probably Sinner until
he must be very annoyed at himself that he couldn't get farther. He's losing quite a bit of points because he made round 16 last year. So he might actually go back down to number 3 if Djokovic can repeat his quarterfinal from last year. So yeah, biggest upset of the men's side. Other upsets we have Volte Van de Zandschulp losing to Tirante. I mean, Van de Zandschulp has just been in a nosedive since he lost that final against Rune. I still feel so bad for him after he could not close out. Yeah, he really choked in that match, and he's not played well since. I think a big name, not a big name, but a name that was trending upwards. Jan-Lennard Struff. He lost to Jerry Lehechka, and that's a bad draw.
Yeah.
Lehechka is really good. He's one of these young players that's starting to play better this year. And he's already has some really good results and good wins against big players. So pretty bad draw for him in the first round, coming in with that 21 seed after he played so well in Madrid. So that's too bad for him, but not a huge upset, I would say. And then we had Kecmanovic, not a huge upset, but qualifier from Italy. I guess it is a bit of an upset there for him. And the other big seed that sort of got upset here that it's of note is Felix Auger-Aliassime. So unfortunately, his struggles continue. Now this time, though, we have to cut him some slack because he was having a little bit of Pepto-Bismol type issues. Apparently
that's the worst to play in.
Yeah. And honestly, it didn't start here. Apparently he's been struggling with this for a week or maybe even more. So he was just not himself today.
He was,
or yesterday against Fognini. So it's unfortunate for him, but again, on the clay and the way he's been playing this year, not a huge shock, really, I would say. But yeah, apart from that, we also had Bernabe Zapata Miralles, who lost to Diego Schwartzman. Schwartzman was down 2 sets and came back, so maybe that's the spark that he needs because he's been really bad recently. Really bad.
Yeah.
I think he's defending. I saw somewhere that he was defending a lot of points in this tournament to the point where if he lost in the first round, he would drop outside the top 100, I think.
Oh, my God.
So he was in trouble. But so that's a good win for him. We'll see if he can keep it going. I think he's playing Nuno Borges next. I'm not really sure what I think about that. But those are kind of the biggest upsets from the first round. Other than that, Alcaraz, he looked great. I think Djokovic looked great. We saw some highlights there. Unfortunately, we could not find any highlights of Sinner. For some reason, they don't have them available. So not sure how he's playing yet, but he moved on pretty easily from the score. So those are kind of the bigger results for the first round. So from there, what we can do is talk about the rest of the draw and maybe preview everything that's left and do some predictions. So let's go for the first quarter. Let's go for the potential quarterfinal matchups. So by seed, right? So first quarter, we have Carlos Alcaraz as a top seed. The other high seed that landed with him, Stefanos Tsitsipas. That is not good news for Tsitsipas. That's all I have to say about that. Second quarter, we have Novak Djokovic. He is the number 3 seed. So as we said earlier, because of Medvedev winning in Rome, Djokovic lands in Alcaraz's side, so they could meet in a potential semifinal. And the other high seed from his side is Andrei Rublev. Pretty good draw for Djokovic, I would say, right? To be with Rublev there. The other two options would have been Sinner or Rune.
It's much better.
So I think I'll take Rublev if I'm Djokovic. So those are sort of from the first half, the potential quarterfinal matchups. From the second half, the high seed was Daniil Medvedev. That would have been a potential matchup for Yannick Sinner, in a quarterfinal. And Sinner must be happy to see Medvedev gone because he's really struggled against Medvedev. Although I would have backed Sinner on a clay court, but still. And the other potential quarterfinal would be Rune against Rude. So that would be a rematch of last year quarterfinal in Roland Garros, and also a rematch of the Rome semifinal. So those are the potential matchups by seed. So maybe we can go by quarter. So right now you have open here. Let's go for that first one. Let's go that one you have right there, the Rune and Rude section. Anything that stands out to you, Jish, from this side?
Well, Struff is gone.
Struff is gone. That's a big one.
I would say maybe Taylor Fritz can make some ground.
Yeah.
He has a pretty good draw until he faces Rune. I'm actually excited about this Rune Monfils match.
Yeah, that's happening now, right? That's the second round match.
Yeah. I think they're playing Thursday. It'll be good.
Yeah, that would be a pretty exciting one. I think, I agree with you. Fritz is probably the guy to look at from this side in terms of the other seeds. Sarandolo is also dangerous. He's also here in this section. And they're both potential. They could meet each other, and then the winner could probably face Rune. I would say from non-seeds, the big guy that stands out for me is Nicolas Jarry. Won in straight sets, first round. He had a really good win. He had a tournament win, actually, in Geneva.
Mm-hmm.
I think he beat Ruud on the way to the title. I think Ruud was the defending champion.
Wow.
So, good result for Jarry there. And he also had a really good South American clay swing. Now, with Jarry, it's a little difficult to really know because he's more of he's kind of like Zverev that takes advantage of altitude and things like that on the clay. So I don't know how he would do at Roland Garros. So he's a guy to flag. Let's just put it this way: I wouldn't be surprised if he is the quarterfinalist from this section.
Oh, wow.
To face potentially Rune. So he's the one guy that stands out to me, apart from obviously Ruud in this section, and Tommy Paul is also here, but he struggled a lot. So in the clay season, I don't expect too much from him. Anything else before we move on to the next quarter?
I think that's it.
Okay, so next quarter we have the quarter with Jannik. Let's talk about the Sinner section. So we have anybody that stands out to you?
I
from
think
this
he has
side?
a great draw. I mean, maybe Dimitrov sometimes can give people trouble, but if Sinner's gonna brings it up a notch, he has a higher level.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Karatsev might make some.
Karatsev could be dangerous.
You
Honestly,
never
like
know.
no joke.
Yeah, I mean, he could take out Tiafoe.
I think he's the favorite in that match. To be honest.
Yeah.
Honestly, I think he's the favorite to make this round 16 from this
To
section
play center, right?
to play center.
Yeah.
So Karatsev is one to watch. Already beat Popyrin in the first round.
Wait, did he have to qualify again?
He had to qualify. He was the number one
my
seed in
gosh.
qualifying. Number one seed in qualifying. Yeah.
Let's go Karatsev.
He didn't drop a set in qualifying, so if that means anything.
That's great.
Yeah. So he might be a potential dangerous threat here that is unseeded in this intersection. What about in the Medvedev, I guess now Coric section, because Medvedev is out. So let me just read these names.
Yeah.
So in the Medvedev section, we have Coric, Kashin, Echeverry, Alex de Minaur, Yoshihito Nishioka, Max Purcell, the doubles player,
Wow.
Guido Pella, and Sebov Wild. One of the people that I just listed is going to be a quarterfinalist in Roland Garros this year. That is crazy. I mean, that is the draw that Medvedev. This is why Medvedev winning Rome was so bad for the draw, because you just knew this was gonna happen if that happened, if he won Rome, and here we are. But all credit to Chorich if he makes it, because he's been playing well, and I think he has the form at the moment. He's in form, so he might survive this section here. But one of those guys is gonna make the quarterfinals. So that is collectively what stands out to me from this side. So yeah, so maybe we can make some predictions.
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, you want to start?
Sure. All right, I'll start from the top.
Okay,
I'll go.
let's do Alcaraz's quarter.
Let's do it. So from Alcaraz's quarter, should we do like the round
What
16?
are your quarterfinal matchups, semifinals and finals and winner?
Okay, so quarterfinals, I have Alcaraz and Korda.
So, I like Korda.
Yeah.
Actually, I do like Korda.
So
I did not see that Korda was in that section.
I think Korda has. I mean, we've seen him play well in the past. On clay, so I don't know his form right now.
Wait,
but
where is Korda?
Korda's right here above Schwartzman.
Schwartzman. I see him.
Yeah.
Huh. Sneaky one there.
I have him beating Tsitsipas.
You know what? I can see that happening.
Yeah.
The biggest reason, I would have gone high on Korda, honestly, because he's been good when he's been healthy. It's just that I don't know how healthy he is.
Yeah, I don't know either.
But if he's healthy, I like that pick.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, and then right underneath, so the Djokovic section, I have Djokovic and Wawrinka.
Why am I not surprised?
This is a bias.
why am I not
podcast.
surprised?
There's nothing based on form.
Is there a draw that you haven't picked Wawrinka in the quarterfinal?
Let's go. Stand the man.
Had a big win in the first round.
Yeah, he did.
Good stuff.
He pulled it out.
Pulled it out there.
He just has a few more to go. And then the bottom, I have Arune versus Rude, which I think will be a blockbuster match, hopefully.
Yeah, I think that's going to be good.
Yeah, it'll be a good match. And then in the bottom, I have Sinner and George.
Did you have Chorich before, or did you just
honestly,
made yours after?
I mean,
right?
yeah, I made it after.
Yeah, I have to say what I actually had, because I already have two people that have gone. Not one for the men, one for the women. Okay, so who was your semifinal?
So semifinal, I have Sinner and Rune.
Okay.
And then on the top, I have Alcaraz and Djokovic. I really want that match to happen. So
Alcaraz and Djokovic.
yeah,
Okay.
and then Alcaraz wins that one, and he's in the final, and Sinner is in the final.
Ooh, Sinner.
And Sinner wins it.
Ooh, Sinner wins his first
Yeah.
Grand Slam.
Yeah.
Okay.
I
Well,
think
one of these days when
I've-
we predict Sinner to
I've
win, he'll
picked-
win. At this point, you got to predict them every time, because
I
you
just
can't
have to
miss
keep
it.
Doing it. Yeah.
Okay, I like it. I like your predictions. I can see it happening. Okay.
He's got to be healthy.
So, for me, top section, I got Tsitsipas and Alcaraz. Yeah, I'm just not sure about Korda's health. That's the only reason.
Mhm.
So I think Tsitsipas will just by default make it to the quarterfinal. Alcaraz, honestly, I don't see any threats. The biggest threat is probably Musetti in terms of history. They've played before. Musetti has won on the clay against Alcaraz, but Alcaraz is just a better player now than he was when he played Musetti last year, when he lost to him. So I gotta go Alcaraz there all day. Bottom side, I got Rublev making seed as well, and I have Djokovic. And then on the bottom half, top section there, I have Holger Rune making the quarterfinal, and I have Casper Ruud also making the quarterfinal. And then on the bottom, I did have Medvedev before, so I have changed that pick to Chorich. Who did you say again? Did you pick
Chorich.
Chorich?
Yeah.
Okay. So I have Chorich and I have Sinner. For semifinals in the bottom half, I have Casper Ruud beating Holger Rune.
Ooh.
And I have Sinner beating Chorich. On the top side, I have Alcaraz beating Tsitsipas. I have Djokovic beating Rublev. So hopefully we'll get the match that we want between Alcaraz and Djokovic.
Mm-hmm.
Semifinals. Victories. I have Alcaraz beating Djokovic.
Wow.
I just think that the youth is going to be too much. And I got Rude beating Sinner and making the final.
Oh my
again.
gosh.
Back-to-back
Ruud.
finals for Casper Ruud.
He's gonna defend those points.
He's going to defend the points. And for the winner, I have Casper Ruud. No, I'm just kidding. Come on. I got Carlos Alcaraz. To me, he's the overwhelming favorite, and it'll be a massive upset if he doesn't win this tournament. So I got Alcaraz
So
winning
you're
the title.
thinking this is the passing of the torch?
Kind of, yeah. Unfortunately, Rafa was not there to pass the torch, but yes, I think it is. I think he's gonna.
Emotional.
I think he's gonna defend the legacy of Rafa in this tournament, at least for one tournament.
You think Rafa would, if Alcaraz gets in final, Rafa will be in the stands?
Maybe he will. Actually, it'll be cool. It would be cool if he is. I want him to be there.
He's gonna give the
well, no, it'd be too painful for Rafa.
Because he's gonna come back next year.
He want to come back next year to win it. Maybe later when he retires.
Yeah.
But he'll be cheering Alcaraz so that he
will.
He can protect the Grand Slam record still. They can both still be tied. Djokovic and Nadal.
Oh, that would be...
Yeah.
Oof.
Gatekeep him there.
Imagine Djokovic winning this. And
yeah. On Rafa's turf. That would be painful. Painful for me.
Everyone.
But honestly, that's a question that I had. Like, how motivated is Djokovic going to be? Is he going to just destroy his body to win this Grand Slam? Like, how
I guess
deep?
His elbow is not that great.
How deep is he going to dig to try to, just get it done right here at Roland Garros this year,
Well, he cracked a bit when he tried to do the whole year calendar slam.
True.
And he had a really good shot at winning it.
Honestly, that could be a factor, but it could also be, like you said, a pressure factor as well. So who knows? But honestly, I just think Alcaraz right now is too good. Just in the form that he's playing in, he just seems like he's too good. And Djokovic doesn't seem to be the type of player that matches up that great against Alcaraz. Like, he doesn't seem to be like a counter, like a direct counter to Alcaraz's game. Like Sinner is, like Sinner is really good. The one thing that he does really well is the return, right? So he can hurt Alcaraz with the return, for sure. But in the rallies, he's not as aggressive, right, as Sinner. And he doesn't redirect, as naturally, I guess, as Sinner does. Like nowadays, Djokovic generates his own power a lot. Mm-hmm. And he's basically a more... he plays defense, but he also generates his own pace. But he's not he's not trying to counter fire with fire the whole time like Sinner is doing. And that is the way to really hurt Alcaraz. So I feel like in terms of the matchup, I like the matchup for Alcaraz. And I also like that he's in better form and younger. So I just think he's going to be too much, I think, for Djokovic in this. But the other side, I'll give you my reasoning for Ruud making the final because it sounds crazy. But honestly, I am betting on the fact that I still cannot trust the physicality of Rune and of Sinner. Like I just think that it's gonna be hard for Rune to, if he's already breaking down in 3-set matches physically. And he already struggled with Casper in Rome. I feel like Casper, with the experience, having been there before, I think he's still going to be like a little bit more confident. Maybe next year when Rune has grown into his body a little bit more, he's more physically reliable. At that point, I think he surpasses him, and I always pick him. But this year, I think it's going to be a physical battle for him. That's the only reason. Because if it were for the tennis, I would go for Rune. In this, but for now I go for Ruud, and I think by the fact that he's a little bit more fit and more reliably fit, I go with him. But let's wrap it up there and move on to the women's.
Let's do it. All right, number 1 seed Iga.
Number 1 seed and the defending champion, Iga
Iga
Swiatek.
Swiatek.
So, top seeds, apart from her, is number 2, Arina Sabalenka. Number 3 is Jessica Pegula. Number 4 is Elena Rybakina. Number 5 is Caroline Garcia. 6, Coco Gauff. 7, Ons Jabeur. 8, Maria Sakkari. We have some other ones as well here that we're not going to go through all of them, but there's, again, 32 seeds. We've had more upsets on the women's side than the men's, not by much. There's 13 upsets from the women's side so far. Not any like super major upsets. I would say probably in terms of seed, the biggest one is probably Sakkari. But honestly, that match with Sakkari and Karolina Mukova, that match honestly to me felt like a Mukova. I thought she was favorite in that match.
Gotcha.
And I actually picked her to win that match, so I'm not even surprised that she lost that. There have been other upsets that have been pretty shocking. The most shocking upset, I think, so far for me has been Belinda Bencic losing to a lucky loser in Alina Avanesyan. I have never heard of her before. And Belinda Bencic, she's number 12 seed, and she was having a really good year this year until the clay season started. But very, very bad loss there, I would say, for her. Apart from that, a big story, a nice story, is one of the upsets was Martina Trevisan. She lost to Alina Svitolina, who's coming back from maternity leave. She actually had a baby. She got back to full fitness, started playing some tournaments at the challenger level, and then at the last week at the WTA level, and she actually won a title last week. Elena Svitolina. So first title after becoming a mom. She actually also made the final of another event. I think it at the challenger level. Remember we talked about Sloane Stephens winning a challenger event last time we recorded.
Mm-hmm.
It was against Elena Svitolina.
Oh wow!
So she made the final of that, and then won the other tournament, and now just beat the defending semifinalist at Roland Garros from last year, and Martina Trevisan. So great story on the women's side there with Svitolina. Obviously, she's also a Ukrainian player, so she, a lot of emotions, from the war and all that. She was showing there's a lot of things going on with her own personal achievement, plus, the things that are going back home as well. So great story there. Love to see it, and I hope she can keep going far. So I think that's one of the bigger results in terms of upsets there that happened. Apart from that, I think another big upset on the women's side, I would say it would be Veronika Kudermetova. So we talked about it in Rome that she was playing great, and also in Madrid, made semifinals of both tournaments, but she lost here to an unranked player in, I can't even say his name, Shmedlova.
Yeah.
And it was very comprehensive, 6-3, 6-1. So very poor loss there from Kudermetova. So that's the other biggest upset, I think. Some other ones that we had, for example, Azarenka going out to Andreescu. I don't think that's really a big upset. Andreescu, we know who she is. Krejcikova, that one,
Normal.
Yeah, that one I would say is a bigger upset. But Krejcikova has been struggling lately. Not necessarily a shock, just given the recent form, but she is the former French Open champion, so definitely I would say a big upset there. But yeah, I think those are kind of the bigger results so far. Apart from that, we have some of the top seeds play and win and look good. Pegula, pretty comfortable win against Danielle Collins. We had Iga Swiatek, after having a close first set, opened the bakery in the second set with her bagels, 6-4, 6-love. And I think she's starting pretty strongly her title defense here in the French Open. Apart from that, Sabalenka also was able to um, to recover from that loss that she had in Rome. Pretty comfortable win over Marta Kostyuk, who has been playing pretty good this year. She could be tricky, on a good day for her. So good win for Sabalenka there. And other players of note that are good to see winning is Ons Jabeur, who had that really bad injury.
The calf one. Right?
And the calf injury, and she had to withdraw from both the match in Madrid and then completely in Rome as well. Or actually, no, she had to withdraw from Madrid as the defending champion and pull out of Rome as well as the defending finalist. So she didn't play both tournaments because of that injury. So it's good to see her back, and it's good to see that she has, she's been able to win at least one match so far. And she's somebody to watch. On the clay. Let's not forget that she was the second best clay court player last year.
Right.
And she was one of the favorites to go to the final in Roland Garros. She had a shock loss in the first round, but she was talked about as a potential dangerous player here. So somebody to look out for. So with that, maybe we can start talking about the different sections and go into predictions. Maybe let's start with Iga's section. Anything that stands out here, I guess the biggest thing is that most of the seeds are gone from this section already.
Cleared up for her.
Most of the upsets occurred here, very concentrated in this section. So I guess the toughest player that she could face until the quarterfinal is probably Andreescu, right? So I would love to see that match. And I think this is a great opportunity for Andreescu, actually, to make a round of 16 match there. But overall, looks like a pretty nice quarter for Iga. In the next section, there are potential quarterfinalists. So her actually potential quarterfinalist by seed would be Coco Gauff. And she's in there. She won the first match, but she did lose a set. What do you think here? We have potential upset there before the quarterfinal. Do you think she can hold seed?
I mean, she has a good draw too.
Pretty good draw. I would call out one name from here. Mira Andreeva. She was the girl, and literally a girl because she's like 15 or 16. That had that really good run, and I think it was in Rome. No, it was in Madrid. Actually, she had beat 3 top 20 players in a row, I think.
Wow.
And then she eventually lost to Sabalenka, but who was the eventual champion. So she eventually lost to the player who won the tournament, and she's only 15, 16 years old. So really, really nice story there. Her sister was also she's an older sister. She was also in the draw, but she lost already. But she is one person to watch from this section here. That Coco Gauff is the highest seed.
Yeah.
Next section, we have Rybakina as the top seed there, and her potential quarterfinal opponent by seed. Who would it be? Is it Jabeur? Oh yeah, it would be Jabeur. So pretty interesting match if that happens. But in that small section for the round of 16, any names that stand out for me? Alexandrova can be dangerous on the clay. Petra Martic is pretty good on the clay. Linda Noskova is a young player that she could be pretty challenging for the second round. Noskova is pretty young. She's one of the many Czech players that are promising. So she could be a handful for Rybakina. So I think there's a lot of possible hiccups on this side for Rybakina, particularly on the clay, that she could maybe lose to. I mean, she lost to Gerard Maya in either Madrid or not Monte Carlo, either Madrid or Stuttgart. So that could be a potential trouble for her. So I think what stands out to me is that there's a lot of potential, difficult matches that she can run into. And then the Jabeur section looks honestly pretty good. Especially her coming from injury. I think this is what the doctor ordered, honestly.
Slowly play into the tournament.
Exactly. She could find her form, play into it little by little.
Yeah.
The only seed left here, apart from her, is Donna Vekic, who's not really that great on clay. She's had a good year, but she's not great on clay. So I like this section for Jabeur, actually. Pretty nice section to be drawn into. So that's the top half. On the bottom half, we have the section of Maria Sakkari and Jessica Pegula. And we already have the upset of Maria Sakkari. So Karolina Mukova takes her place in the draw, essentially. And of the seeds that are left there, we have Potapova. Wait, am I reading this right? We have Pegula, we have Mertens, Potapova, Samsonova, and Begu. Those are the all the seeds in that sort of quarter. And on, let's go with Sakkari's side, we have only one seed left there in Begu. So one of those players that are unseeded is going to make a quarterfinal. And I think very strongly that Mukova is looking like the favorite there. Mm-hmm. Maybe Leylah Fernandez is another name that jumps up. She's unseeded, but we know how good she can be on the clay and just generally everywhere. She's just been hurt a lot and can't really stay healthy. But if she can stay healthy and find her form, she could be dangerous. So Mukova, Fernandez are kind of the names that stand out to me in this side. And then in the other section there in the same quarter, we have all of the seeds still remaining. We have Samsonova, we have Potapova, Mertens, and Pegula. Pegula has been Mrs. Consistent, so there's no reason to not expect her to continue that. Some names that jump out here, apart from the seeds, I would say Pavlyuchenkova is dangerous. She's a former finalist of Roland Garros, if not semifinalist. And then Cami Osorio, who actually lost in qualifying, came in as a lucky loser and won her first match. She's pretty good on clay.
A Karatsev story?
More like a Struff story, right?
Struff story.
Because he was the lucky loser. Could be. Mertens is not a bad draw on clay. But I think she probably will have her hands full with Pegula, though. Yeah. But, good section here. I think they're still pretty competitive. Samsonova could be dangerous whenever she decides to be on. So she's so inconsistent, so it's tough to predict with her. Mm-hmm. But then the bottom half, finally, we have Garcia section along with Sabalenka. That would be the potential quarterfinal matchups by seed. And on Garcia's side, we also have Ostapenko and Kasatkina as seeds left. And we have the nice story of Svitolina. So Svitolina is also in there. And she actually was playing pretty aggressive in her match. Like, I don't know if you remember Svitolina when she played, but she used to be kind of like a defensive player. But she showed a little bit of pop on her forehand in this past tournament. She's working with a new coach, so maybe that's something that she's trying to add, a little bit more aggression.
That's good.
So who knows? Maybe she can pull off a surprise here. Yeah. There's a lot of inconsistent players in this section, so she could make a run here. But then let's finalize with Sabalenka's side. I think a few names that stand out to me here. One is Sloane Stephens. She's been playing lower level events just to get some reps in. I think she mentioned that last year she just came a little bit cold to the French Open and couldn't do anything. But now she tried to play some challenger events, some lower level events, and she's finding form. And she was able to get a pretty good win in the first round against Karolina Pliskova, which is not easy in the first round. So good win for her there. She's a name that stands out. Qinwen Zheng, I think she, like I said, I'm really high on her. I think she's going to be really good. She's very young still.
How old is she?
She's 19 or 20. Okay. So she's already shown pretty good promise. Pretty deep in Rome as well, and took that set off of Iga last year at Roland Garros. So I think she has promise on any surface, honestly. But apart from that, I think Sabalenka probably is the heavy favorite in this section. So that's the women's draw. Maybe let's go and do predictions, and I'll start this time. So let's start on the top. On Iga's section, I do have Iga making that quarterfinal. I do have a surprise quarterfinalist. So I originally had Veronika Kudermetova, but she is already lost. So my pick now is going to be Mira Andreeva. I'm just gonna go for
There you
the
go.
I'm gonna go for the nice story, young player. Hopefully she can pull it through. In reality, who knows? This might be the one Grand Slam that, Madison Keys doesn't play any tournament well, and then she plays in the Grand Slams and it goes far. So maybe she's the one who does it. But I'm gonna go with Andreeva. I like the story. Hopefully she can go that far. But Iga against Andreeva quarterfinal. Bottom section, I got Rybakina, and I got Jabeur.
Wow.
I just think Jabeur has a really nice section, so I don't see her losing up to that point. I think Rybakina could lose earlier, but she's just been so good this year and so reliable that it's just hard to not pick her. So that's Iga against Andreeva, Rybakina against Jabeur. Bottom section. So I had Mukova and Potapova.
Mm-hmm.
I actually originally had Mukova, so I had that. I didn't have to change my pick there with Zachary. Mukova against Potapova. And then I have Sabalenka, of course. And for the other one, I originally had Martina Trevisan, but she lost to Svitolina, and I'm actually going to pick Svitolina to make that semifinal or that quarterfinal. I just like what I saw in the last tournaments there, and I just like the story. I'm mostly pulling there just to see a nice story happen. So Svitolina against Sabalenka. Let's see if that happens. Semifinals, I got Rybakina beating Jabeur, and I seriously consider Jabeur in this because that matchup on the clay seems like the perfect matchup for Jabeur if she's 100% healthy. With her variety, I feel like she could trouble Rybakina a lot. I just don't know if she's 100%. And Rybakina is now a Grand Slam champion, very good this year. Just tough to not go with her. So I narrowly have Rybakina winning that, but I would not be surprised if Jabeur wins. Andreeva and Iga, I have to go Iga, of course. There. So semifinal is going to be Iga and Rybakina. I got Potapova beating Mukova, and I got Sabalenka beating Svitolina. I have Sabalenka beating Potapova, so Sabalenka makes the final. I got Iga beating Rybakina. She's 0-3 this year against her, but I just think until you beat Iga at Roland Garros, I have to see it before I pick somebody else. So I'm going to go with Iga. And just because of what I just said, I pick Iga to win the title. I think she is just a little bit better at Roland Garros and a little bit more confident than most of the players on the women's side. But I can easily see Rybakina and Sabalenka also lifting the trophy. I think it's one of those three. And maybe an outside chance for Jabeur. But
yeah, it would be an amazing story, actually.
That would be amazing. Amazing comeback.
Yeah, it would be good for her. So I'll share my predictions. I guess I'll go ahead and do the quarterfinal ones.
Mm-hmm.
I have Iga, and actually, this is random, but it'll be Madison Keys.
Okay. I mean, I can see it.
She'll have a good run, I think.
I mean, that section is a little open.
It's very open.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then I have Rybakina and Jabeur. I think it depends if Jabeur is actually healthy or not.
Yeah.
In the bottom half, I have Leylah Fernandez playing Pegula.
Okay.
And then C. Garcia playing Sabalenka.
C. Garcia. Why am I not surprised?
Yeah.
Is she going to win the title?
No. She loses to Sabalenka.
Okay.
It's Sabalenka and Pegula I have there. And then on the top I have Iga and Rybakina. So Iga wins, beats Rybakina, and Pegula beats Sabalenka.
Ooh, okay.
So I can't see Pegula beating Iga.
So Iga
But
wins the title.
Iga wins the title.
Yeah, it's
So-
hard. She is. I mean, she's the only betting favorite on the sort of, what is it, the negative, like the odds.
Okay.
The odds are such that you get less money if you bet for her. She is the only one. Not even Alcaraz is that level. She is the biggest favorite on either draw to win the title, and it makes sense. I mean, she's won Roland Garros twice, and she was just so good last year here. So
And she seems like she has a different demeanor.
yeah,
Just from that first round that
Yeah.
we saw.
she just comes with a different confidence to this
Yeah.
tournament. So we'll see. We'll see what happens there. But I think until I see somebody beat Iga on Roland Garros, I have to pick Iga.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, so those are our predictions for Roland Garros, and we're excited to cover some of the results next week as well. But before we finish, just want to recap. There are a lot of things that we didn't talk about today that we will talk about next week. So we mentioned the story with Simona Halep. She again had another sort of allegation of doping. This one was a little different. It's more of a irregular, I guess, blood distribution or level or whatever it is. So it's not a direct test. It's more like of an indirect measurement of her blood over time, and that came abnormal for her.
Mhm.
So that on top of the first one,
Tough.
right? And this came after the fact that she put out a statement saying that this was dragging on long and long. So we are going to dedicate the time that this deserves because it's a big story and there's a lot to it. We just don't have the time today to do it, so we'll do it next week when we cover some of the results and preview the quarterfinals. So that's one. There's a lot of war-related issues that came up from the Ukrainian players, particularly in the match between Sabalenka and Marta Kostyuk. There was the no handshake, which we all knew would happen, but the French crowd booed Kostyuk for not shaking Sabalenka's hands. And then there's a lot of stuff that came over in the press conference later from that. Apart from that, there was also the Djokovic thing that he wrote on the camera lens about the thing with Kosovo. So there's a lot. There's a lot to unpack there. We want to give it the time that it deserves. So we'll cover all of that next week or in our final recap of Roland Garros. So we want our listeners to make sure that we haven't forgot about these big things. We'll talk about them. Before we finish, I wanted to ask you about power rankings so far. So I have. So last time we made some power rankings for the end of the hardcore season, coming into the clay, and I just wanted to see if things changed for you or not. For me, you can say if you agree or not, and maybe you can say who you would put instead.
Yeah.
I made two levels: one overall power rankings, and another one for the clay specifically, which I consider Roland Garros threats. That's my top 5 essentially. For the men, overall power rankings, I'll go number 5 to number 1. Number 5, I have Yannick Sinner. I think he's had a great year so far. Better start to the year than last year. Shown a lot of improvement. A little bit of a slower end to the clay court season.
Yeah.
Right before Roland Garros, but he started well. So I think overall he deserves to be in the top 5. I got number 4, Holger Rune. He is an update in my overall rankings. He was not in my power rankings last time. I had Tsitsipas instead. So, and I think I put Rune over Sinner just because of the better clay court season. I think that gives him a little bit of an edge. And he did beat Sinner the one time that they met in the clay. Number 3, Novak Djokovic. So Djokovic is number 3 and not number 2, mostly because he had a poor clay season, honestly. Actually, he would have been lower if not for the respect that I have that he is Novak Djokovic. So I'll keep it at number 3. He started the season well. He won the first Grand Slam of the year. He still has one of the best records of the year. So I think he deserves to be number 3. But number 1 and number 2, it's honestly very close. It's a toss-up to me between Medvedev and Alcaraz. But I think overall I went number 2, Daniil Medvedev. He's had more titles than Alcaraz, but Alcaraz has a better winning percentage. And recently he has done a little bit better. So that's why my number 1 is Alcaraz. Any agreements, disagreements? Anybody that I left off that you would have put in?
Left off? Probably not. I think those are the
sounds correct.
Five,
No Tsitsipas, no Rublev.
No.
Okay.
Sorry.
No.
No.
Okay. For the clay, I have a different power ranking. I moved Djokovic to number 2.
Okay.
Holger Rune number 3. Sinner number 4. And I took out Medvedev from the list entirely. I don't know why people were so like
Really?
Medvedev threat for Roland Garros. No. And I put Casper Ruud number 5. And Ruud honestly is a controversial one because he's been pretty dreadful this year. But on the clay,
it's a different story.
He got to the semifinals in Rome. He won a title already. He got to another quarterfinal or semifinal in Geneva.
Yeah,
he's done.
He's sneaky about.
He's done good enough on a clay, and he made the final last year at Roland Garros. I just think he deserves some respect for that and for this particular tournament, just for Roland Garros. So that's why he's my number 5. Yeah, and his draw. Honestly, let's be fair. He has a really good draw.
He has a great draw.
So that's my top 5. Any?
I would switch the order. Put Sinner above Rune.
Okay.
That's just me.
Would you put in Tsitsipas instead of Ruud?
No, I would maybe even put Ruud above Rune. Maybe drop Rune to number 5.
Okay, that's probably more controversial than what I did. But overall, we agree pretty much with the power rankings. Women's side, I think is pretty easy, right? We don't even have to go for the top 4. We don't have to do 4 or 5 because 4 or 5 is really difficult. But we know that the top 3, right? Elena Rybakina. The way that I ranked it over in the overall section, I put Elena Rybakina number 1, and the reason is because honestly, I think Rome put her over the edge, just slightly over Sabalenka. I know Sabalenka has won the only Slam of the year, but Rybakina has won a few Masters 1000. She beat Sabalenka already. She beat Iga. I just think she's done a lot this year, and the fact that she won Rome carries the momentum into Roland Garros. I put her number 1. Sabalenka number 2. She's played pretty much every semifinal or more in every tournament except for Rome. So, and she won Madrid. So there's no reason to argue there. Iga number 3. She's just really not had the best year compared to the other 2. But she's still Iga, and she's still and we're on the clay. So number 3 seems right. Then 4 and 5 could really be anybody. Jessica Pegula, she's still pretty consistent. I think she deserves to be 4. I put Kurmatova number 5 just based on recent form, but then she lost first round Roland Garros, so she's probably going down.
The most recent form.
The most recent form.
Yeah.
And then on the clay, similar. The only difference is that I removed Pegula from my list, and I substituted her with Ons Jabeur, and I changed the order. Iga, number 1. Sabalenka number 2, Rybakina number 3. Agree? Disagree?
I agree.
Yeah. I think the women's side was pretty easy. We have a pretty clear cut big 3 on the women's side, and I think it's exciting to have that. So, really excited about Roland Garros, second Grand Slam of the year. There's going to be a lot of tennis to watch. We're going to cover all of it. We're going to talk about it next week, and I'm excited. You want to wrap it up?
Yeah, let's do it. Like, if you liked what you hear, please subscribe to us in your favorite podcasting app. You can receive all the latest episodes as they become live. We're on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, and other major podcasting platforms. Leave us a rating and a review. We'd appreciate your feedback to make this the best podcast possible. All right. You can find us on Twitter and Reddit at Point by Point Pod, and on YouTube at Point by Point Tennis Podcast. So let's wrap up this episode, and we'll see you guys next week, covering some of the results from the first week, as well as previewing the quarterfinal and semifinals. So it's
Can't
exciting
wait.
times.
Yeah,
Yeah.
can't wait.
And
Thank you, everybody.
Take care.
Take care.
Bye.